of Washington AAUP's chapter, and I will introduce the moderator for today's event, who will introduce our speaker. So to introduce our moderator, let me welcome Rachel Chapman. Professor Chapman is a social, cultural, applied, medical, and activist anthropologist. Her research, teaching, and service address the intersections of race, class, and gender in the politics of health justice within and outside of the US. And for 32 years, she has focused on illuminating processes of change and continuity, resilience, and peacemaking, power, and performance in oppressed communities, especially movements to end health disparities, including state and intimate partner violence, and building racial and social justice in the urban United States and Southern and Eastern Africa. What matters most to her is Black love and futures, building community capacity and conditions so everyone can flourish and reach their fullest potential to join collective action for planetary health, universal healthcare, food, income, shelter, and global dignity, equity, justice, and peace. Currently an associate professor of anthropology at the University of Washington and adjunct faculty in the departments of global health and gender, women's, and sexuality studies, she is also proud of her identity as a poet, performer, and transformative justice worker. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Avi. I was like, who is that woman? I need to meet her. I want to be her friend. Thank you, Avi. That was a wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody. This is the third in a series of, well, we're calling them skills workshops for faculty, supported by a grant from the National AAUP office to really support the organizing and skill building and coming together of faculty in the local AAUP chapters. And we've really focused on rights, faculty rights, and responsibilities in such tense and polarized times. We asked Monica McLemore first and foremost, before we asked anyone else. She was the first person we reached out to see if we could get her. And luckily she said, yes, next May, that could work. And here we are in May. I'm going to do a shorter version of Dr. McLemore's bio because she's going to introduce herself as well. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Monica McLemore. She's a tenured professor in the Child, Family, and Population Health Department and interim director for the Manning Price Spratland Center for Anti-Racism and Equity, called CARE, in nursing at the University of Washington School of Nursing. Prior to her arrival at UW, she was a tenured associate professor at the University of California, San Francisco, and was named the Thelma Shobe Endowed Chair in 2021. She retired from clinical practice as a public health and staff nurse after a 28-year clinical nursing career in 2019. However, she continues to provide flu and COVID-19 vaccines. Her program of research has focused on understanding reproductive health and justice. To date, she has 108 peer-reviewed articles, op-eds, and commentaries, and her research has been cited in the Huffington Post, Lavender Health, 6 amicus briefs to the Supreme Court of the United States, and 3 National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine reports, and a data visualization project entitled How to Fix Maternal Mortality. The First Step is to Stop Blaming Women. That was published in 2019, Future of Medicine edition of Scientific American. There are so many other accolades, publications, titles, prizes, awards I could tell you about, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Monica McLemore herself. Welcome. We are so proud and excited to have you, Monica.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I am assuming that you all hopefully can see my slides that I will share with everyone. And am I in presenter mode? Can you? No, I didn't think so. Okay, so let me go back to my little situation. So I get for trying to, adjust my screen. Okay, So I'm going to take about, I don't know, 15 minutes to talk with you about some tools, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. You can put your questions in as we go along. I use she and her pronouns, and my life moves very quickly, so I'm gonna update even some of the things in my bio. And I thought I had sent the most updated version, but clearly my life moves faster than I imagined. I hope you all are having a good spring quarter. I know it's very busy for me, and it's also a very busy time legislatively. And I can just tell you that there's so many things I could talk about. And so I'm going to try and keep this brief so that we can actually get into the meat of what your questions and comments and suggestions might be. As typical at the University of Washington, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that the University of Washington was built on the traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples, land which touched the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present. I also will direct you to the labor acknowledgement that comes out of Public Health Seattle King County. I think it's really, really important, if it's not obvious to you from a positionality statement. I am a Black American, and it's really important for me to acknowledge the labor upon which this land was built. And if you don't know this acknowledgement, I want to shout out Dr. Wendy Barrington and the members of the ARCH Anti-Racism and Community Health Center for bringing it to my attention. I'm going to dedicate this talk. I wish I was brilliant enough to have come up with digital alchemy. That is not a phrase that I coined. Dr. Moya Bailey is. And if you know nothing about her work or their work, excuse me, Black feminist informed sociologist, amazing digital technologist, and digital alchemy comes out of this incredible work, Misogynoir Transformed Black Women's Digital Resistance. And they provide a lot of case studies, and they provide a lot of insights that inform parts of this talk, but also the title of this talk as well. So let me start with positionality. I don't know how many people know me. So, I mean, my bio was very helpful, but, you know, I'm a very productive scientist. A lot of people think I spend all my time on social media, and I'm like, actually, that's not really true. Social media is a tool, just like peer-reviewed publications, right? And the way that I think about it is being a public scholar is part and parcel, not just to who I am as a person, but also to my domain of science. I work in reproductive health rights and justice. I have my entire career. So the idea of not being a public scholar is incongruent with actually what the work is. So for me, you know, I have had a $14.2 million portfolio in research. And I always like to tell people, especially if early career scholars are on this call, I have never had federal funding. Not from NIH, not from BCORI, not from National Science Foundation, not from HRSA. I've never had federal funding. My mentees and learners have, but I myself have not, despite 10 applications. So when people tell you, you know, keep going, persistence, keep going, I am going to keep applying. But you can have a great research career without federal funding. I also will say I've had some recent wins where impact matters. My work has been cited in GOA reports, in a recent Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's final rule around pregnant people and worker fairness acts. The Momnibus finally passed, so my work is cited in 5 of the 12 bills around improving maternal and infant health in the United States. So for me, it is very important that you understand I'm a very serious scientist. I have a public scholarship persona that puts me in a position to have to deal with online, in-person, and real-life harassment. So these tools actually come out of my lived experience. They're not theoretical. They're actually things I've had to learn over time. As an early adopter to technology, my colleagues and I spent a lot of time in 2014, 2015, and 2016 trying to convince the scientific community that we needed to use social media tools. I have very little tolerance for people who talk about how frustrated they are around misinformation and disinformation because they're not using the tools that the people we use serve. We're not translating our work for the public. And so we can't be mad when people are using tools that to gain access to information that might be running rampant with misinformation because we're not on them, right? Or if the work that we do sits behind paywalls that people can't access, and we don't create other kinds of infographics or webinars or podcasts or other kinds of things to help explain what our scientific findings show, then we only have to be mad at ourselves. And like it or not, I mean, I get that, I lived in the Bay Area for a long time. I was an early adopter to Twitter. In fact, I dismantled my account on my birthday last year because I just got so over the Nazis, the bots, and the trolls. But I had a Twitter account with 50,000 followers since 2009. So as an early adopter to technology, I felt it was my job to help people understand how tools need rules. So how do we develop rules for tools that the people who developed those tools didn't think about, right? I think I see that as our job. So with that, there are public scholarship tools that I've learned over time to outsmart harassment. Now that said, harassment is a default setting for me because I am a Black person, I am a Black woman, and we are easily isolated, neutralized, and harassed. That's just a thing. And I can direct you to everything from, Pew charitable trust polls to actual scientific data that show that harassment is just a part of being a Black woman in the United States. That said, I'm a brilliant person, and this is a brilliant group of people. And, people who want to harass folks online in real life or in public have no monopoly on brilliance. So my job today here is to activate you to really think about what are new tools that we can come up with. Because like racism, harassment morphs over time, it mutates and it changes to the social construct and the environment we find ourselves in. So I think it can be outsmarted. Tool number one is to surround yourself with other public scholars. If you don't know some of these people in this picture, you have, Judge Glenda Hatchett on the right end, Representative Robin Kelly, who is a congressperson from Chicago. You've got the preeminent Dorothy Roberts, who we hosted in January on our own campus. You have Professor Michelle Goodwin. You've got Professor Kiara Bridges, Dr. Carolyn Suffern. Surround yourself with other public scholars. There are lawyers, physicians, psychologists, nurses, public health people. Linda Goler Blount is in the middle. She runs the Black Women's Health Imperative. I don't do anything alone so that I can't be easily isolated and neutralized and intimidated. So tool number one, surround yourself with other public scholars. I'm one. You're going to have my email address at the end. Send me an email. Okay. Number two, we need to recognize that because tools need rules, we have to ignore the temptation to be intimidated by attorneys. If you don't know who this is Stephanie Toti. Stephanie Toti, behind Sarah Weddington, is the second youngest lawyer to ever successfully argue an abortion case in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, right? I talk to Stephanie Toti often, not just because our work is in reproductive health rights and justice, but as a lawyer, and I am a clinical person, right? I love to be able to hear what the state of the science is in the law. I love to hear about what her perspectives are around harassment and how she manages it. One of the coolest things that she does that I'm not comfortable with, but other people are, she is willing to lie online, right? Now, I guess I kind of lie online by omission, since I have practices when I travel that I will tag myself in places on social media where I'm actually not, because I actually get live, active, and credible death threats, right? So sometimes I tag myself in places where I'm physically not at to be able to confuse online harassers who want to cause me harm in public, right? But she's a person who says, yeah, I don't tell the truth online. That is another potential tool. But talk to other people, especially legal people. Don't be intimidated by attorneys. They actually can be great collaborators, colleagues, and thought partners in outsmarting harassment. When I was a pre-tenure assistant professor, everybody told me I was going to ruin my career because I was on abortion-related billboards to support Attorney General at that time, Javier Becerra, when he was arguing a case before the Supreme Court, NIFLA versus Becerra. He's now our Secretary of Department of Health and Human Services. And I was like, but it's the right thing to do. And in preparation for that, I got, I've always had a Google Voice number that forwards to my phone. I hate that journals ask for our cell phone or telephone numbers, right? So I got a Google Voice that forwards my number. I never give out my cell phone. Like, if you are lucky enough to have my cell phone number, it's because we know each other in real life and we've probably had food and drink together. But other than that, you get the Google Voice that number that forwards to my phone. Why? Number one, it automatically gives you a transcript and it doesn't ring to your phone. And number two, you can forward that email to authorities or anybody else when they're threatening. So get a Google Voice number and forward it to your phone. Use Delete Me and the Internet Wayback Machine. You can have things removed that are not true about you. I do this all the time. You can have yourself deleted from email lists. You can have, at one point, somebody put the entire Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health people on a Blue Lives Matter Eventbrite listserv. And we were getting all these emails about police meetups. And, I was like, oh my goodness, why am I getting these emails? Well, Delete Me fixed that. Use Signal. Signal is a dual encrypted text service, group text service that is better than WhatsApp. It's better than your texting on your phone, and they disappear. Right? There is no maintaining of those messages. So Signal's great. Many organizations, I use the ACLU anti-doxing guide, but there are other anti-doxing guides as to how to protect you, especially if you have children, or if you are worried about your home address being dropped. So being doxed means that somebody's going to post some very public stuff, private stuff about you in public and online. I live alone, so I'm lucky that I don't have to worry about, folks showing up at my children's school, but this is covered in doxing guides, right? And then we have normal, things that you should be doing just as a good cybersecurity and as a good faculty member. The link that I put in the chat talks a little bit about this, especially two-factor authentication. You want to be using password managers. You want to be rotating your password. There are ways to outsmart how people can find you online. There are also physical ways that I do this. I have an office in the School of Nursing that's near the stairwell for a reason that points into the courtyard where people cannot see whether or not I'm in my office or not, right? That's a safety measure, right? There is no way that you will know if I'm in my office or not, such that, I can't be, gunned down in my office or snipers can't take me out from the street, right? There are ways for us to be thinking about how to defensively protect ourselves, but also be able to get our work done and not have to stifle our creativity. Number 4, ask for help when you need it, push back on echo chambers, and reject false binaries, right? I actually don't think our country is polarized. I think our Congress is, right? So I like to be real specific in language, and I will push back. Melissa Harris Perry and former President Obama taught me this at the frontiers of science, right? I got invited. I was the only nurse to speak at the frontiers of science. And it was so interesting because I spoke after, engineer and physicist Dean Kamen, which was fascinating. I had a great conversation. But nursing is such a broad, wide discipline. I'm not going to let somebody tell me what I can and can't say, what I do and don't have expertise around. I always have to remind people I'm a laboratory trained basic scientist in addition to being a clinician. So the idea that I would address basic scientific people or life sciences people is not that odd, especially when I've published in those domains. So sometimes you have to ask for help. And to be able to push back on narratives or push back on echo chambers. Sometimes I choose to engage online trolls. Sometimes I don't. But I've also learned I don't have to react to everything, and everything does not deserve a response. Tool number 5, consider the consequences of your decisions and be willing to stand by them. I wrote this piece on COVID. So all of these pieces are from Scientific American. You will notice a through line here. For a while, I was doing a lot of pitched op-eds as well as opinion pieces, perspectives for them. And so this is dated March 26, 2020. right after New York City had decided that they were going to not only lock down hospitals and healthcare institutions, but they were no longer going to allow for accompaniment for pregnant, capable people in their hospital, that birthing people would have to come alone. And in some situations, you know, people had to choose between their mama or their doula, or their spouse or their doula, right? And I wrote a whole op-ed. It was very unpopular at the time. An entire group from Harvard had worked collaboratively with some clinicians in New York City to write the ethical case around why birthing people should come alone. And I was like, during the pandemic, when we already have a maternal health crisis, are you kidding me? If people are courageous enough to want to parent through a pandemic, we need to rethink our systems, right? I took a lot of heat on this op-ed, and I still stand by every word. And it was amazing how prescient I was at the time, and want to stick to our ethical principles. This is a whole other one. Argue in public with evidence. When I wrote this piece around rejecting the false binary that abortion has to be an either or conversation, we wrote this op-ed to accompany a 50-state survey that we conducted with the Association of Women's Health Obstetrics and Neonatal Nurses. We'd surveyed them over time. This was the public translation of those survey data. We were arguing in public with data, with evidence. And we got the journal where those data were published to make it open source for 30 days so people could go look at the data in and of themselves, even though the article itself was behind a paywall, unless you were a member of the professional organization, right? I argue in public with evidence, with data, not always, yes, it's an opinion piece, but we directly were able to link back to the science that underpin the ideas of the op-ed. This final one got me really in trouble. This got me on a hit list where 42 past deans of schools of medicine, basic scientists, I mean, very prominent people, including E.O. Wilson's last PhD student, signed a very nasty, hateful open letter about me. Rabiz Khan, who a lot of people know from UC Davis, wrote an open letter that was horrific. To this day, I still haven't read it. That got me a lot of death threats for almost a month, both online and letters mailed to my mailbox. Since I have a UPS mailbox, I never publish my home address. But like, have a hierarchical understanding of how you communicate and who you do that with. There were a lot of people who tried to discredit me when I wrote this piece, not recognizing the work that I had done as a basic scientist, not recognizing I had been intramurally at the National Institutes of Health in Francis Collins's lab, that I knew everybody that I was talking about in this piece. But yeah, it's very important to have, like, I have a hierarchical way I think about of engaging with people. If we've had a meal and we've met in person, I deeply consider what you have to say, whether it's praise, a critique, or both. If we've never met in person, I disavow and disengage myself from my emotional reaction to needing to respond to you. So to recap, before we open this up to some questions and answers, these are your tools, right? This is them by list, so you can understand that accepting harassment is not, that we don't have to. Right? We have university tools in place to assist us in addressing these. We have skills and ways that we can protect our peace, as well as our homes, as well as our email inbox. That's the other thing. I use a ton of filters. People ask me how I get 40,000 unique emails per day, because I do. And yet I never have unread email in my inbox, because I have rules that send them off to folders. And I only read those folders on certain scheduled times on my calendar, right? With tools need rules. You need to understand how you want to associate with those tools and those rules. Here's some other things to also think about. I tell the truth in public, and I try to fail as spectacularly as I succeed. And people know this. I have given public apologies. I have admitted my own errors. I have a whole talk that is entitled Lessons Learned from Epic Failures. And I include myself as the first exemplar, right? I apologize when I'm wrong, and I don't react to everything. I'm also really honest. I was very much known for leaving up Twitter threads when I was on Twitter, even when I was wrong and even when I had been corrected, just so that people could have the entire record to understand what happened. I am not a fan of deleting things when I post them, regardless of where it is online. I find that to be really disingenuous. And quite frankly, when I know better, I do better. So with that, I'm going to stop here and get some questions, some comments, some suggestions, some feedback. I can talk about a whole lot of other things if folks are not chatty and are feeling kind of quiet. I am myself everywhere, so you have my affirmative consent. I will give you these slides. You can post, you can tag me. These are my handles on all of these platforms, and I welcome the discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point because I think it's really important that we not be intimidated, that just because we don't necessarily have the skills yet to be able to address online harassment, I will tell you, I am very proactive and very clear about not tolerating online harassment. I will name people when I am being harassed. I will aggressively go after people who think that harassment is an appropriate response to things that I do. I'm not just going to silently suffer, because I don't think that that is conducive to a democratic process. And I always see these as opportunities to model the kind of behavior that I expect to see from others. So with that, I will take any questions, any comments, any feedback, any suggestions. I have a ton of recommendations. If you have personal experiences that you want me to respond to, or if you have hypotheticals that you want me to respond to, if you do, I don't think you can unmute, so I think you have to put your question in the chat. Please, if you do, give me your pronouns so I know how to appropriately refer to you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Monica. I think we will wait and get some questions in the Q&A. But I have a couple to start us off, if that's okay.
Totally.
My first question, we've seen even here on campus that sometimes the online doxing is precipitated by an encounter in which it feels like no matter what you do, you can't win. Like you are going to be portrayed badly. You are going to look like, it could be, even if you say stop, if you say you're harassing. Do you have any thoughts about how you deal with that kind of in your face harassment, sort of from the tribe of John Cho and others like that, who really get in your face and try to instigate? That's my first question, because this is often begins.
Yeah, people try to peg me. I'll answer this with an example, and then I'll directly address that piece. When I was doing a presentation at the Association for Women's Health, Obstetric, and Neonatal Nurses, and if you don't know anything about that organization, has 25,000 members, paid members, but it represents the interest of 350,000 nurses across the country. And I was giving a talk with some colleagues. I was on a panel about what public health abortion facility standards should look like. And there is a very vocal minority of people within the A1 organization that are very anti-abortion and really believe that abortion is murder. And one of the people who believe that actually had the courage to be able to say that in the standing room only group of individuals. And this was pre-Dobbs. And, you know, one of our panelists wanted to, you know, get into an argument with her. And so I stopped her. It was a midwife, and I stopped her and I said, no, let me take this, because I'm at the mic and I'm the moderator for these questions, but let's model what the kind of behavior and the kind of conversation we want to have. And so I looked to this person. I said, first of all, thank you very much for being courageous enough to actually say that in this room. I said, because if you're thinking it, I can only suspect that other people are thinking it as well. And so that you've respectfully listened to us in our presentation, came here and didn't walk out, and had the courage to ask us that question, I really appreciate it. I said, let me address just sort of the fundamental issue I have in the framing of that discussion. And because it started off respectfully and she wasn't trying to come up and be in my face, that is an effective strategy that one can use. When people are effectively trying to be in your face and trying to be confrontational and trying to pay, I always fall back on Monica's golden rule, right? If you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, then do the right thing and be very graceful. I will sit and listen in silence. And sometimes I think silence, like music, is one of the best tools that we can ever use to be able to diffuse a situation. And so for me, I don't feed trolls. I stand, I will nod, I will listen, I will not react or respond. And I will let a long silence happen until either they stop talking or they will ask me if I'm going to respond. And my answer always is something along the lines of this: I will respond to you in a respectful manner when I know A, what I want to be able to say, and when B, you can affirm for me that you are going to listen and not say anything until I have completed what I have to say. And I will let you know when that is. And that generally tends to diffuse a situation. For some people, I don't engage at all. They don't even get that level of courtesy because I don't find that kind of sensationalism helpful. And I find that when you engage in it, it removes your capacity to think critically about how you really want to respond. I also don't believe in being right. Right. I think I listen to understand. I'm not necessarily listening to respond to be right. And maybe this is just a reproductive justice thing, but I okay a lot of times is going to be my response to things. Okay. Or I've heard you. Thank you for sharing that. I practice a lot in talking, having very difficult conversations as a responsible adult, and having very difficult conversations as a responsible adult to no resolution. And I'm really okay with that. Is that helpful?
That was super helpful. And I am imagining that there are people in the room who have examples of harassment that we would love to hear from. If you want to put your name in the chat so AB can find you. While we're waiting on that, Monica, this seems like it's so ubiquitous and so intense in your experience. Do you think people are too paranoid about it? Is it something that could be ignored? I mean, I'm
Oh.
living with someone who's being doxxed and I see how ugly it is. And I can see how if you pay attention to it, you feel like something really horrible is about to happen. Do you feel like maybe we're too paranoid?
No, I don't think we're paranoid at all. And at the same time, I was very clear. I have never read the letter that's been written about me. I know people who have, and people I trust have highly recommended to me that I not read it. And part of it is because they know how serious I am about protecting my peace. I have been given a summary of what that letter contains. But I've never read it myself. And maybe at some point in my life I will. But I haven't. That said, on the one hand, so I'm a true believer. And I know that might feel incongruent, but I am a true believer in discourse, dialogue, democracy. I don't have to agree with, I don't want a whole bunch of sycophants who think the same thing running around on earth. Like that actually is not helpful. And I joked with a colleague yesterday, but I'm actually being very serious about this, that if I ever end up in one of the health policy fellowships in Washington, D.C., that I would love to be able to have that I'm applying for. I actually want to be placed in a conservative congressperson's office. Not one of them crazy nutball ones, but like an actual, like a real conservative person who wants to dialogue with me, because I think that will sharpen my understanding of their perspective. And it will also force me to grow in how I think about constructing my thinking and my argument. That said, I think we don't have enough reaction. Like, I am very disappointed, and this was true at UCSF. It's not just here at University of Washington, but I am disappointed that the only tool I currently have to use is a carceral one, or police. That disappoints me. But again, you keep us gummed up that way. You keep people in fear. You keep people not wanting to talk. Then we don't have the creativity that we need to think about how else we could approach this. Right? So we stay in the same cycle, which I reject. So I am trying to think differently around how can we better engage without the escalation, without all the drama, without all of the, vitriol. So that's, I'm trying to, the reason I protect my peace is because I actually want to curate that space. But for now, what I have is, oh yeah, I send my death threats to campus police and forward them on to the FBI. Right? Inadequate. Whatever. It is what it's the tools that we have right now. We need new tools. And I can't do that by myself. Those have to be collectively developed. And I think as a scientific community, we can do that. But we can't, what we can't do is we can't ignore and avoid those things. And we can't continue to feed them as legitimate. Like, I'm all about like respectful scientific discourse and disagreement about core principle matters. But I am not, I will not tolerate violence or threats or other kinds of things like that. It's a waste of my time.
Thank you so much for going exactly where you went. I'm still waiting for questions to come in.
We might not get enough, so you and I just gonna sit here and talk. We're gonna have an audience. How about that?
Well, you went directly to the two things that I think we should really have some discussion, and it would be great to hear what people think we might do collectively. But I was going to ask a question about everything that you suggested. Is you handling this on your own when much of this might come towards you because of your role in an institution? So my question is, right now, I don't think there's a collective way in which we at University of Washington would have protection, would have some other option than calling the police. If on campus we felt threatened because of something that we were doing in relationship to our work as professors, as researchers, as mentors, as advisors. And I wondered if you thought that there should be more of a thoughtful, organized, collective response from our institutions to also support us when should we be out there on our own managing this? It sounds expensive and time consuming and scary. And
well, let me tell you, so I'm going to move into Monica's wild and crazy ideas, right? Because I'm that person, and why not? I would love to be able to have community-based organizations. So you and I are community-based organizational, like, researchers in some of our work that we do. I would love to have community-based organizations help us to try and adjudicate this and figure it out. I love the idea of a tribunal approach to thinking through conflict. And I don't know that we are the body to do that. Right. I am a big fan of community accountability, and we have multiple constituencies and communities that we serve, whether it's, students, whether it's the people we contract with and procurement. Right. I mean, there's just a whole lot of different ways that we could think differently about how could we have a collective response to what our shared values are, right? What our shared mission is. But that gets to thinking about a land-grant institution as an anchor institution. And if you're an anchor institution, that means you need to be connected to the other democratic institutions that sort of help to organize our society. There's a working group that I'm a part of. So this is a hat tip that's actually thinking about this. We're meeting tomorrow. Derek Filer and Jody Sanford and Ed Taylor have pulled together people from across all 3 campuses for an initiative they're calling Revitalizing Democracy. And in that group, we've been talking a lot about what would it mean to have a collective strategy, not just around harassment or around, doxing or around, so-called polarization or divisiveness. I actually think that's all the distraction. We're not getting at the root of the matter. And the root of the matter is there are different opinions about what the future should look like, and people making decisions in the now trying to impact that. And so as long as that's true, okay, then we're moving towards that. That's actually I think a lot of times we're having the wrong conversation. And so by continuing to focus in on, we only have the police, or we have an inadequate response to harassment, can we get at the root cause of the harassment? Can we get at what's really fundamentally causing us to think that we want to be it, or we're in conflict? Can we get at that? And that requires us to do things institutionally. Like, we need to slow down. We need to have some teach-ins where people are freed up of time to be able to engage. Right. And I think the webinars have been great. I think, what the Senate has been trying to do is really great, but I actually think we need to pause. And I mean pause in like a really big way. And I know that gets people agitated, right? But I think we as a society need to pause. I maybe it's just me, but as a nurse who was supposed to be on sabbatical when COVID hit and we first had lockdown, I remember being very, very pensive and very thinking, wow, this is what our society actually needs. And yet we made a decision to go exactly back to the chaos that we found ourselves in, right? So if we really wanted to be transformational, we would find ways as a campus to pause, right? I know that's not the kind of answer that you're probably looking for, but that's what I actually think is really needed. I think that and not using the tools that we're currently using, because clearly they're not working. So what could we learn from somewhere else? What could we learn from some other field, domain, discipline, right? What could we use? And so when I think about it, I think about like, time out, or there is this thing around, we need a pause, and we all need a shared reset. And I think if the campus could figure out how to do that, without any game or output, I think that would be very helpful. But that would mean we would all value the process and not actually the outcome. So there's that, right? I think for too long in grants and paper, like we always want this thing, and yet we don't pay attention to the process through which we get the thing. And then we're confused why it feels as though we're talking past each other, or we're using the same words, but don't have the same meaning. So if I had a magic wand, I would call a pause.
Do you think that's something that might get on the table in your tri-campus organization?
You mean the Center for Anti-Racism or the Revitalizing Democracy?
Yeah, are people thinking
Oh,
about
yeah.
out of the box?
Oh yeah, I mean, I said it on day one of the meeting, right? There were faculty who came to that discussion who wanted to complete every assignment, and I just sat there stunned. I was like, why are we doing this good? Like, I was that person, right? There was so much compliance around getting the assignment done and getting the deliverables, and I'm like, wait a minute, right? If we wanted to create, and I believe this, I don't know a lot of faculty, students, and staff believe this, so I'm gonna name it. If we wanted to change this, we could, right? I mean, because like we are the ones who created all of this. So if we wanted to change it, like if we all really wanted to change it, We actually could. Like I'm the Dorothy could have always gone home because she always had the power and the slippers, but somebody had to tell her that she trusted. Like I'm that person, like Wizard of Oz for people who don't know. But like she always could have gone home, right? I mean, in retrospect, that makes sense. But like, so I think yeah, I mean, how interesting would it be to say we are going to close down not just for a holiday, but we are going to close our campus down for teaching or for a whatever, and we're going to delegate that to allow the units to be able to determine how they want to use that time, and we're not expecting a damn thing from it.
That's a question that just came in. What would happen in that pause? And it sounds like you're really hoping that each small community will use it the way that they need. But just having some unpressured time might give us the creative space to start thinking about how do we care for each other differently. You know, as you know, I've been really committed to bringing expertise around transformative justice and restorative justice to help us have more tools, as you said, for accountability at the community level. And unfortunately, there's so many people at University of Washington who think they've gone through a process, but they haven't. So and unfortunately that has stalled some really productive conversations about having new ways of dealing with conflict, fear, violence in our lives.
Well, and I think the other thing that we don't talk about as a faculty is uncertainty, right? I mean, one of the things that I think harassment comes from a lot of different places, but one of them is for some people, you know, our workplace is inhumane, right? For some people, there are legacies that feel, or people that feel as though their legacy is being erased. For some of us, it's the frustration that, you know, the misinformation and disinformation that's running rampant is undermining science, the very fundamental thing that we're trained to do. For some of us, and granted, I'm on the health services side, you know, it's the frustration of not being able to provide the kind of care and the environment that we want to be able to train up future healthcare providers in a humane and caring and dignified way, and knowing theoretically how something should happen and then how it's operationalized and the disconnect from that. Like we need space to talk about that. My experience of the professoriate has been very different than how I dreamt about it, how I even saw it operationalized in my own life, because I'm not the first Dr. McLemore in my family. And so for me, it is this notion that we need to have a really serious adult conversation about why would someone like harass or move to harass. And for me, it comes out of a couple of different places. It comes out of frustration. It comes out of anger. It comes out of fear. It comes out of, you know, and I bet our psychology people could help us with, you know, a whole host of other emotions from which, you know, this comes from a lack of shared definition about what harassment actually constitutes. So, you know, for me, it's as a community of scholars, right? Because that's who we are. And the mentees and the staff who support us, it feels strange that we can't have both an academic and a practical and applied discussion about this. And so we're coming at it from the perspective that if we provide people skills and tools, that perhaps maybe there might be some space to create that dialogue. But I've had some really, really great discussions with Cindy in the Senate, and I don't mean to call you out, Cindy, but, you know, some people don't feel safe, right? And that's a whole other conversation, right? So one of the other reasons why I try to be as public as I am, I'm never anonymous, so there's that. And somehow we have a community that allows that, right? So, I mean, right. So there are all these structural pieces that I think we as a community of scholars could talk about. What I mean when I say I'm never anonymous, when you talk about the Black full professor in School of Nursing, you already know it's Monica. Anytime we ask any kind of demographic things, it's like the unintended consequences of trying to capture data. So without the protections of anonymity, one of the reasons why I am so public is digital alchemy. I turn it around such that if something is going to happen to me, a whole lot of people are going to know. Maybe folk might decide to do something about that. Maybe not.
Digital alchemy. I want to keep that phrase on the table as we get some more questions coming in. Thank you for that really thoughtful answer. The question that's come in, and I'm sure that this is from Catherine Schiffner, and I think we could unmute you as well. Would you like? Yes, please ask your question about junior faculty, junior scholars.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I was wondering what advice you might have for scholars earlier in their career about navigating online harassment and other forms of harassment, because we have heard from researchers, especially people of color and women, that this is something that they're concerned about having a negative impact on their career.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question because that was me. That was the life. I was on abortion-related billboards pre-tenure, and very senior scholars told me that I was going to ruin my career. And my response was, okay, so be it. I said, if I'm at a point in my career where I'm no longer tenurable with millions of dollars, and at the time I went up for tenure, I had 55 peer-reviewed publications in highly ranked journals. And I had my research findings in 4 amicus briefs to the Supreme Court at that time to talk about policy impact. I was like, then maybe academia is as broken as I think it is. Right? So on the one hand, tenure doesn't afford you all of a sudden the backbone, the spine, the scars that you need to build up over time. All of a sudden, some magic wand isn't going to be waved, and you're all of a sudden going to be some badass running around the country. Like that's not how it works, because that thick skin that has to be developed over time has to. And I'm not saying this right. I'm just saying this is how I did it. Right. I had to buck convention. I mean, again, arguing with science is a perfect example. Much of the work that I do has historically not been federally fundable, right? People didn't want to touch reproductive health rights and justice, right? You have a whole ass Hyde Amendment that says that federal funds can't be used for abortion. So there were structural issues that said, but did that stop? Does that mean we have to sacrifice epistemological diversity because things are not federally fundable, right? There are qualitative decisions that early career people have to make all the time. What I would say is fire mentors who don't back you. Okay, you can email me. I know there's a whole lot of other really cool people in the OB/GYN department and peds. Like if you're if you're a repro person, but like if your mentors are really not backing you and your science, you need to maybe add it to that mentor pool, or maybe pull in a sponsor. And if you don't know the difference between an advisor, a mentor, a sponsor, a coach, and a therapist, I got a whole lecture on that. But I worry that future knowledge production is going to be limited by the perception that we have a so-called polarized society. So early career people need the protection to be able to do the kind of work. So if you are a tenured person, if you are associate or higher, if you run a center, it is our job to make sure those early career people are not easily isolated or neutralized, right? Especially if they're people of color, or if they're women, or if they're trans folk, or whatever, right? If they're young, if they're disabled, if they're old, we have to protect those people because our future brain trust, right, needs that. This is why I love intergenerational cohort hiring, right? Or matching people in mentoring cohorts and teams, because it provides protection and shade for those early career people to let their mind wander. Or maybe we need to have a discussion about science is only political and we need to gain the evidence, because I have this argument all the time with lawyers in my field. I'm not a gun for hire. I don't I actually really don't care what you perceive the research gaps are in the literature around like your legal arguments. You're not going to dictate the science that I think is necessary in reproductive health rights and justice. I get that that's a gap. Don't get me wrong. But like I worry that too many scientists are shills either for their funders or for industry or for whomever, that the idea that they have a original, novel, wild, crazy thought that, you know, whether it's fundable or not, that they have a question that they want to get answered, that at least let's not strip that from the early career people, right? If we dare, okay, that's another thing to deal with. But I there's a reason that early career people gravitate towards me. And part of it is because they know I will back them either way because their ideas are worth it. And we'll figure out funding. We'll figure out publication. We have the brilliance to outsmart this perspective that only 1% of mega NIH donors get to decide how the rest of us live as academicians. Nope. So from where I sit, I think there's 3 different conversations that need to be had. The people who hold power within academic institutions and keep the machinery running, those of us at associate and full level, we need to have a shared commitment that irrespective of what our early career people want to study, as long as it's ethical, right? And align with principles of our professional organizations, right? And but that we will support them. Right? That's an institutional commitment that we could actually make, to Dr. Chapman's point, that we will invest in our early career folks, that they will have the freedom to be able to, you know, let their mind wander, and that we will rein them back in to be able to allow for them to develop a lifelong program of research that impacts human existence. I hope that's helpful. I know we're almost at time, and I want to thank everybody for listening. My email's open, my socials are open. I would love to continue this dialogue. We have got to figure this out. I wish I was brilliant enough to say that I could by myself, but I can't. And we need a whole lot of really brilliant people thinking about this, and we have a whole lot of really brilliant people at the University of Washington. And I'm proud and humbled to be able to be with you all. Let's figure this out, because we can.
Wow, thank you so much. Can you let everyone come off mute? I don't think we've missed any specific questions, but I'm inspired, and I'm also aware that being around people that are fearless can help a lot of us find our
Okay, see that's
needs.
yeah, that's helpful.
And I feel it's catching.
Well,
And
fear only works on people who are afraid. I have that on the shirt. That is a Monica-ism.
I love it.
Mhm.
I love it. Follow your data, follow your heart, and follow your true values.
Yep.
Thank you. AB, can you put everyone off mute, please, so we can make some noise
I
up in here?
believe they can unmute themselves
Yes,
now.
please.
I
Jay, can you
appreciate
test?
you
You'll
all,
be the
and
test for us.
Please generate some noise and
I
warning.
appreciate you all. I see Senate Chair Dougherty here. I see my dean is here. Thank you for being here. And seriously, hit me up by email or social media or whatever. We're going to figure this out because we're going to change the future. We have to. And it's going to change anyway. So we might as well have some say in it. Thanks for being here, y'all. I got to run to
Thank
my
you, Monica. Monica,
Yeah.
while you're here, can we hope that through the work you're doing with the democracy group,
Revitalizing Democracy with Ed and Jody.
yes, that maybe you maybe create some space to invite a broader group of people to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to
I
recommend.
think that would be really exciting to
I
talk
will
just
do
about
that.
this.
I
Thank you,
absolutely.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
You.